Chapter 551. Luck of the Draw. The barons cheered as they realized the potential of this arrangement. Not only did they have a chance at the very best spots, they got to choose their own. The princess hadn't even reserved any of the lands. No, that wasn't right. The lands closest to the city were not marked as available. So, either they were already assigned to other barons, or Dominic intended to keep them as ducal lands for farmers under his control to work. Much of that land was actually slated to be part of the city, but they didn't know that he was already planning ahead for the massive influx of refugees that he was expecting to be here within the week. He was also counting on being able to keep some of those people around to work the fields. All right, since everyone is too excited to eat properly, let's get this party started. The bag, please. The maid smiled as she shook the bag, rearranging all the cards inside, then held it open at table level for Dominic. And our first name of the day is Dax. Congratulations. Come up here and place your token on the land of your choice. I'm sure that you've all been obsessively studying the map, hoping for a particular spot. Rigged, one of the other barons joked. Right? The man really does have a luck buff. First choice of land, and he's marrying a minor princess of Amerdun? Commander Dax has all the luck. The jokes continued as Dax helped his bride to her feet and led her to the map. What do you think? The spot that we wanted is available, he asked, speaking softly. Princess Min smiled. That will be lovely. The hill and weather should be perfect for grapes, with lots of flat ground for farming and that stand of ironwood trees. Dax nodded decisively and placed his token on a spot roughly 30 kilometers from Westover. It was a fair way from town, but not so far that they couldn't get back in an hour with a mechanical horse or a steam truck. Once Westover Duchy had some proper roads built, that was going to have to be one of the next projects, regardless of how many new residents they got from the refugees. The roads needed to be built so that goods could travel smoothly between the baronies and the airship docks, or the merchant guild warehouses. All right, next name. Let's see how his luck nearly as good as Commander Dax. Dominic shook the bag dramatically, then reached in and pulled a name. RJ, you're up. The baron in question rose gracefully to his feet and helped his bride to hers. Dominic took a second to remember where he had seen her before, but then it clicked. She was with the Signia noblewomen. Well, one of the batches. However, her noble lineage was highly suspect, and Dominic was quite sure that she had been one of Rita Wentel's ladies for hire before she had come here. RJ sure did look happy, though. They could call it life experience, or a chance to start over. It wasn't like most of the barons had never seen the inside of such an establishment before. RJ examined the map, then stooped so she could whisper in his ear, and nodded. Then, he placed his token down northwest of town by about 10 kilometers. It was away from the river, in a wide open area that Dominic knew from the reports had abundant volunteer crops growing. The manors there were all in decent shape, so they shouldn't have issues housing the knights, but more importantly, they had more farmhouses than usual. Thank you for the opportunity, Your Grace. We will do our best to get everything in good running order as soon as we finish the wedding. One of the other men looked at the map and gestured across the river. Why is none of that marked for development? Not just near the river, but a whole section of the west has nothing noted on it. Dominic shrugged. There are houses there, mostly in need of cleaning. But that is where the monster summoning ritual is, and the threat level is too high to be moving civilians in. For now, it will remain a wild land, with soldiers and adventurers hunting it regularly to keep the population under control. We have determined that other than the ones that were being transported to the location, the ritual also summoned a group of monsters or magical beasts on its own every day since we found it. Ah, good call then. Wouldn't want to try to convince a farmer to set up next to the source of the duchy's greatest monster threat. Especially not when the new arrivals might appear in his living room. Dominic agreed. RJ sat down and Dominic pulled another name, keeping the momentum going. Baron Potato. Abe, your name is third. Your luck is strong today. The barons all laughed as Abe got to his feet, with Melissa right beside him. Well, we already know where we will want to set up. My dearest wife will not be happy without a daily dose of potato, so we will take this plot here. I've already been to the area, and the soil is just right. As he didn't have to attend the events and search for a marriage partner, he had been mostly free the last week, and he had been scouting for good spots. That one had a suitable manor house, and while the land was not centered around it, the chosen territory did include the fields he wanted. Another rustle of the bag, and a fresh name popped out. Kirk, you're up. Kirk was a typically blonde Signia noble, as was his bride-to-be. But Alora was no generic sort of noble wife. No, Kirk had chosen a techno-witch as his wife, and the slightly crazy woman was dragging him across the room to get to the map faster. I have a device. It will show us just the right spot, she insisted. Kirk nodded, and the young woman took a small metal object out of her storage ring. It glowed bright blue as she activated it, and Alexis began to laugh. Dominic couldn't see why. At least not at first. The runes on the outside were numbers. She was using the roll of a magical dice to pick their future home. Chapter 552. Names Drawn. The dice rolled across the map, then abruptly turned and rolled back toward them, before turning again and settling to a stop only one territory separated from Abe's new potato farms. Kirk shrugged. Well, it looks good to me. There's a large pond there, fed from the stream. We shouldn't be short on water, at the very least. It's got good farmland, and the house is nice. But it's also mostly wooded areas, so best prepare to find some woodcutters. Baron Kirk smiled. And some craftsmen. My father was a shipbuilder, so plenty of trees works out well for me. I can start my own factory, or perhaps a repair shop for the airships. I'm sure it will all work out in the end. The other barons laughed at his laid-back interpretation of his future, but they had to admire his willingness to just go with whatever his wife picked by random chance, even if it was a techno-witch magitech artifact choosing. The specialization wasn't known for making rational choices, so any device they came up with couldn't possibly do much better. Still, there weren't any bad options. All of the lands that were highlighted as options had at least a good manor house and a few decent houses for knights, as well as arable land and at least some access to water. It might be a good well or a creek, but there was some water. That was not as urgent an issue for the people of Westover Duchy as it would be elsewhere, as they could all afford to at least buy a Magitech water supply, and most of the manor houses had a Magitech shower, bath, and sink in them anyhow. But it was still good to have fresh water for the animals, and for all the other general purposes you didn't want to expend magical energy on. Name after name, Dominic continued to call the barons up. After a few, it became clear that most of the men who had been promoted to barons were also the highest-ranking military officers, with only a few junior men among them. They were all spreading out fairly evenly, likely for the chance to obtain more land in the future if they attained more military or political merits. Interestingly, there didn't seem to be any arguments about the properties, but after the first few, there was a distinct pattern. The barons were picking land not just based on the land itself, but also on who their neighbors were, though not in a way that suggested animosity. Instead, they were choosing to be as close as possible to barons who had specialties that were opposite their own so that they could trade directly before the goods got to Westover City and the Merchants Guild. It would save them time and money in the long run, as they didn't have to ship as far, and they would be able to trade directly. Obviously, that made the sections of land with vineyards some of the first to be surrounded. But not long after that were the regions that were almost entirely treed. Dominic had ensured that there was enough cropland to feed the baron and his people, but they would have remarkably few knights under them. Few knights and lords, few residents, but huge amounts of hunting grounds. They would have to pick residents with skilled trades that didn't need huge amounts of open land if they wanted to keep afloat. But they would have the best territories to host hunts. You know, this is the easy part. The real fight is going to start when you try to get 300 freshly married young noblemen settled into the territories. Dax laughed as his wife socialized with advisor Tryon. Not of her own free will, if the expression on her face was anything to go by. Oh, I fully expect it. But more importantly, we've got refugees headed our way from all over Axbridge and the Kynwyn region. If nobody objects, I would like to hold your weddings as soon as possible so you can all get settled into your lands before they arrive. They might not try to come into the city, depending on why they left and where they're coming from. But if they see you settled into the manors and making a go of it, You should be able to pick the ones you'd like to stay nearby. Dominic suggested. Princess Min, Dax's bride, turned eagerly to Dominic when she heard that. Oh, that would be wonderful. I was just telling the advisor that many of the royal trappings can be skipped over, as far as I am from the throne in a branch family. We can hold the ceremony tonight, and then tomorrow, we can pack up and get settled into our new home. Princess Alexis looked pained at the thought of setting up for a royal wedding in under 10 hours. But the house was already mostly decorated anyhow, and only a few changes to the decor would be needed to get the venue ready for wedding ceremonies. We can hold the ceremony right before dinner. Let the others know that there will be no events inside the manor today as we prepare. The rest of the ceremonies can be done starting the morning after. Sorry, gents, but Baron Dax will get a head start. And the rest of us will get to escape before things really get chaotic. The minor nobles and untitled sorts are ready to start the ceremonies at the Adventurers Guild, with the priest in attendance. They just need a titled noble from the region, or a royal family member in attendance, to make it official. Dominic nodded. I will make sure it all works out. Alexis smiled. We've arranged for Billy Bob and Baron Keith to attend on alternating days. They're the first two barons to arrive in Westover, and we will join them when the titled men are sorted. As the hosts, they had to be in attendance for the marriage of any titled noble living under their jurisdiction. It was the only way to make things official without a royal present, and asking Prince Alex to do it seemed excessive when he had political matters to attend with the envoys. Chapter 553. Safe Shoes. The main hall of the manor was quickly transformed into a luxurious wedding venue, and the deeper the staff dug through the storage rooms, the more decorations they found to suit the festivities. There was a ton of it in the storage item in the hidden basement level, where it appeared that the former residents had held their formal events. That wasn't what Dominic was going to do. They were keeping that area hidden and off-limits to most, with only Advisor Tryon and the royals aware that it even existed. That seemed like the best way to keep it from becoming an issue, or a status symbol for access, when he was trying to treat all the barons equally. What do you think about adding red carpet to the aisle? It's not a customary decoration for weddings, but I think that it would be a great addition to the color scheme, and it would add a level of safety. Alexis suggested. Safety. The polished stone floors are actually quite slippery when you're wearing brand new heels with varnished leather soles. Dominic patted her on the shoulder. I take it that ladies don't scuff their shoes before wearing them? The soles are too thin. It's not like a good pair of boots that you are going to wear over and over. Ladies' shoes only get worn a few times, then discarded or handed off to someone else, who will appreciate them being in good shape. She explained. I see. Yeah, never thought of that. All right, we have the red carpet, we also have gold and white. Take your pick, and I will get it rolled out. How long do we have? 1 hour left before the first arrivals get seated. Not a lot of time, but enough to finish decorating. Pick the gold, I think. Red is common for events, but gold feels more luxurious with a white dress. Julio offered. It also matched the color of Dominic's eyes, as well as the Dragon King's, so it had long been tradition in wave mates. Not that Dominic would remember that. Dominic ran off to the basement and got the carpet, then rolled it out down the aisle, just in time for the first of the barons to arrive and pick seats for the festivities. Are we missing anyone? Dominic asked. Baron Keith is doing weddings for the untitled men at the Adventurers Guild Hall now. They started as soon as they got the word that we were beginning here. So he won't make it. Everyone else should be here in a few minutes. Julio explained. Well, I imagine that most of them want to either get home or get settled. I don't blame them for being in a hurry to get this over with. The Castellan laughed. You do know that it usually takes 3 to 6 months between the debutante event and the actual wedding, right? Even if she moves in with her husband-to-be, they will only be married right away if the season is perfect and both families are nearby. That sounds like a torture program. Just waiting a few days for my bride was bad enough, and we hadn't even formally set a wedding date until the day of the wedding. Julio smiled as Dominic relayed his experience. He had heard a lot about the Dragonkins' wedding, including the roar at the end of the aisle that had half the ladies of the Signia royal court rushing off to the bookstore in the morning. I'm not sure that your wedding with the princess is the right model to follow for all future weddings, even if you enjoyed it. Many other nations have different procedures and traditions. Julio noted. Well, I guess we just do what we can. The carpet looks good, the rest of the decor is set, and we've added the parts that the Heir court recommended for a minor royal. We will leave all of it up, except the royalty-specific items. That's not going to be an issue, will it? I never did read the whole book on noble weddings. Dominic asked. There are 17 books in total, Your Grace. See, I knew that there was a reason I didn't read them. But I suppose that this will work for everyone with a title. We can change it up a bit once we get through all of them. But I get the feeling that it's going to be more important that we start getting them to their new homes as soon as possible. Those updates you keep giving me about the movement of the refugees and how they're avoiding the other cities while coming this way has me concerned. Julio nodded. That has me concerned as well. There are countless rumors about the nature of the storms and about Westover going around. They may think that this is the only safe spot, or that they need to eliminate it to make everywhere safe again. Both are a possibility, and we won't know which one they're thinking until we actually speak with some of them. The airships have been giving updates, and they're not moving particularly fast, as they're mostly on foot at this point. But we've still only got a few days before they are within the borders of the duchy. Dominic sighed. Perhaps I should take a team and ride out to meet them. At the very least, we would find out what their intentions are. It went without saying that such a plan was insanely dangerous, especially only a few days after an ambush had tried to blow up both him and the second prince. It also wouldn't go over well with Alexis if he ran away from his duties again. Well, we can only do so much. If they come to us, we will get them on their way to proper homes. If they start settling within the duchy, then the barons can sort them out. I doubt that squatters in a noble manor are going to be too well received, but you know that at least a few will try to move into the biggest and fanciest home they see. Julio laughed. 100% yes. And then they will kick up a fuss about being evicted from the Baron or Lord Knight's manor because it wasn't occupied when they arrived. Chapter 554. Fast Track to Happiness. The guests began to fill the room quickly after the first few took their seats, and Dominic took his place at the front, next to the priest who would be conducting the ceremony. Dax had chosen General Merlot and Abe as the best men for his wedding, while Princess Min had asked Princess Poppy and two of the Amaran ladies that Dominic didn't know well to be her maids of honor. The arrangement this time would be similar to his own wedding, and Dominic waited eagerly for the music to start, indicating that the bride would enter. With so many noble ladies in attendance, it hadn't been any trouble to find enough to play the traditional Amur wedding march for the bride's entrance, complete with horns and violins. The lights dimmed to a dramatic glow, and the bride began her walk down the aisle, looking incredibly nervous, while Princess Alexis stood in for her closest relative and walked her down the aisle. At first, Dominic wondered why that was a tradition, as royal weddings didn't have the giving away the bride tradition that common weddings did. But then he remembered what Alexis had said about the shoes. If they were worried about tripping and nerves, it was best to have someone there for physical as well as moral support. His part in this was as easy as he could hope for. He had precisely one line. At the very end, when nobody was listening anymore, the bride stopped at the front, on the mark that had been conveniently built into the floor tiles. He hadn't noticed that before, but it was subtly included in the design of the room. Then the music changed, playing the Signia version of the wedding march. It was only subtly different between nations, but enough to cue the groom to enter the room. Dax's eyes were locked on his bride as he walked down the aisle, and the soldiers in the crowd thumped their boots on the floor in time with the music. Once he got nearly to the front, the music and the stomping ended abruptly, just in time for him to turn and take his place. Dominic tuned out the words of the priest, and instead watched the eager face of all the couples in the crowd. Most of them were looking forward to starting the process of sealing their own marriages in the next few days. And with the odd arrangement, where none of them were politically arranged, Dominic saw none of the tension that he had often noticed between noble couples. An elbow to the ribs reminded him to pay attention to more than the crowd. The couple had opted for the shortest version of the nuptials, and they were already almost to the kissing the bride part, where Dominic had to issue his blessing. "You may now," the priest began, but the couple was way ahead of him, and the old man just chuckled. "Congratulations, Baron and Baroness, may you govern in peace on your new lands. Dominic smiled as he realized he was correct. Nobody was listening to his formal line. But they might need to pry the newlyweds apart before it turned into a full-on makeout session. For the royal wedding, they had arranged the traditional party, intended to drown out any chance of gossips hearing the couple sealing the bond. That was also not an issue here. The guest room off the main hall was soundproofed with a Magitech device. Dominic set a hand on each of their shoulders and guided the couple to the prepared room, then sealed the door and symbolically locked it. Now, the soundproofing was active, and it could be unlocked from the inside. He didn't expect to see them until morning. There is a hidden entrance for the staff to deliver breakfast, and dinner is already in the room. Don't worry, they're fine. Alexis whispered. Oh, that wasn't where my mind had wandered to. Dominic whispered back in a suggestive tone that made the princess laugh. Now you get to see what it's like to be on the party side of a royal wedding. The appetizers and refreshments should be out soon. We don't get to duck out early. As the hosts, we're expected to be here until midnight. Dominic sighed. Tomorrow morning was going to be chaos. They were planning to start ceremonies at first light so they could get as many as possible sorted. The parties for them would be merged in the yard, but even with the abbreviated ceremony, they were going to be at it for ages getting everyone sorted. Was it possible to have too many happy moments in 1 month? In that case, why don't we dance, Your Highness? By the time that midnight rolled around, Dominic had eaten far more than one man should in one day, and he was well on the way to obliterated drunk. So, when the curtains were pulled open at first light, he seriously considered pulling them closed again and chasing the veiled maids out of the room. If he brought out the wings and fangs, he was pretty sure they would give in and go away. But there were others waiting on him, and many of them wanted to finish the ceremonies and spend their first night married together at their new home. Sure, it would need a lot of cleaning and likely renovation, but they had the essentials with them to spend a night anywhere. Bring me breakfast to the main hall. I will eat as we get ready for the first ceremony. Let the princess sleep. We will switch out during the day to keep things flowing. He whispered. Understood, my lord. Now, I have your outfit ready. The first guests are in the hall already, waiting for full dawn. Dominic sighed. They're too excited. They're still awake from last night, either intending to leave straight away or to attend a few ceremonies, then pass out and return in the afternoon. Chapter 555. Many Weddings. Lord Dominic, the trucks are prepared out front. As soon as we have 20 marriages finished, we will send the first pair out to deliver the new barons to their territories. The closest of the refugee groups are under 100 kilometers away from the city and getting close to the lands that have barony manors remaining on them. We've arranged the men who are closest to the refugee influx to be the first of the morning so that they can get into position to intercept and gain as many residents as possible. The strategic planning has been underway since the early hours of the morning, and while the boys are a bit drunk, they're all well practiced in operating that way. General Merlot joked as Dominic quickly finished a morning coffee. Excellent. Where is your spot in line? I picked a territory near the Signia line, so I'm mid-afternoon. The early reports from the airships say that almost all of the refugee groups are coming directly for Westover. They're not trying to dodge you or settle without conferring with the local lords. That's a good sign in general. But we need to start cleaning house, so we're ready to receive them. None of those farmhouses have been used in a decade, even if they're still intact. It's just a good thing that you didn't try to settle the other side. Those estates are a mess after the monsters and the mages. Agreed. And the number of monsters there is too high to be safely settling any civilians. We might put a military outpost there at some point, where the hunters or adventurers can stay and relax between missions. But that's something for later. First, we need to get all of you settled into your new homes and deal with these refugees before they start to show up in Castle City half-starved. The general laughed. That's a running theme, it seems. Everyone makes it as far as Castle City, then runs out of food and hope. They don't think about going all the way across the wilderness to get to Westover. They're truly in rough shape, though. Even with the supplies that have been sent from the city here, they're still rationing. We've done what we can. Honestly, it's more than I think most people would have expected us to manage the first season after we settled here, with so few people. But with this new wave, I'm more worried that we will have too many people and not enough structure. If they aren't farm folk, and I know that most of them aren't, as they're mostly refugees from the Kainwan area, they're going to struggle here. It's not like we've got any shops hiring. Merlot rolled his eyes. Most of them wouldn't be qualified for any of the jobs that we have anyhow. All the jobs that we have within the city proper take magical affinity on a level more than the average person possesses. The average human person, that is. There's a good reason not everyone goes to a magical academy. So, even if they settle in the city, and you somehow find enough room to get them all housed, they're going to end up having to do all the menial jobs around town because they can't work in the factory as anything more than a cleaner. But look at it this way. Their old home is gone, washed away by floodwaters. If they were coming from further east in Dagos, they were in an even worse state before the flood started, so they barely had anything to lose. But this is a chance for them to start over, and we just need to manage it in a way that doesn't lead to total chaos. I like your optimism. All right, let's get this show on the road. Dominic took his place at the front of the room, next to a junior cleric. The old man will be here soon. We couldn't wake him. He whispered. That's fine. Just give the speech, and they'll be happy. Indeed, as the bride came down the aisle, waving happily to her friends, she wasn't even aware that the preacher was not the same man as last night. In fact, even if she had noticed, it wouldn't have been a big deal, as it wasn't her home's childhood priest anyhow. As soon as she was up, the music changed, and the groom came down the aisle. His pace was much faster than hers was, and he wasted no time before taking her hands and turning to the preacher for him to begin. What followed was possibly the most nervous recital of the wedding passages that Dominic would ever hear, and then a loud cheer as the bride and groom kissed. They didn't walk away. The groom swept her up in his arms and strode out of the room while all his friends laughed. They were staying at a shared house in town, so he wouldn't be going back there today. But they had time before the bus was loaded, so he was likely carrying her out to the garden to show off for the couple still in the getting-to-know-each-other phase and the indecisive ones. Your Grace, might we alter the ritual some? One of the men asked. It's your day. As long as your wife approves, I approve. General Merlot gave Dominic a look that said he had uttered a very dangerous phrase. But the groom came up to wait on the stage, while his bride came down the aisle. It was an odd departure from tradition, but the original had been intended to show the groom claiming his prize, while this one was more like the bride volunteering herself. It also let her focus on him, and not the crowd, as she walked down the aisle. There were hushed whispers all through the room as the other barons watched, and Dominic began to suspect that many of them wanted to do the same thing. Or their wives did. Chapter 556, Early Refugees. That thought proved prophetic, Dominic decided. From the next wedding through the 20th of the morning, they all had the groom wait next to the priest for his bride. It cut the total time nearly in half, but more importantly, the brides looked really excited about the change. But Dominic noted that there was one more small difference. All the brides were either wearing fancy white flats or walking barefoot on the soft gold carpet. There were no tall and uncomfortable heels today. That trend was definitely one that was going to catch on. I take it that we're not enforcing any of the traditions? Alexis whispered as she came up to trade places with Dominic. They're so happy barefoot. Plus, the gentlemen seemed to enjoy watching them walk down the aisle. Dominic replied with a shrug. Alexis winked at him. If they're not going to roar at her, this is probably better. Dominic smiled at her and let the princess take over, as the next man came up to take his place. The crowd still cheered for his arrival, even without the long walk, and that was the cue for the bride to come out. Technically, the music was the cue, but Dominic couldn't tell if they could even hear it over the enthusiasm of their new friends and neighbors. Once Dominic was out of the main hall, Julio and the staff from the airship hangars were on him with reports. My lord, we have fast-moving refugee groups incoming. They seem to have broken away from the groups on foot, hoping to get here ahead of them and perhaps get the first claim at either housing or jobs. There are 4 heavily overloaded buses. And I do mean heavily overloaded. From airship reports, they have people hanging off the sides and luggage strapped to the roof. Dominic frowned. That sounds like a disaster waiting to happen. They're on this side of the river, right? They are. They're following the old field roads toward the city and not moving particularly fast, but faster than refugees on foot are going to chase them for more than a few hundred meters. All right, that we can work with. As long as they're not directly endangering the people hanging off the sides of the bus for speed, I say we let them come. I just switched, so Alexis will be fine for a while. Why don't I take Dave and go greet our new guests? If we explain the situation in advance, it should help them understand where they are and what is going on. They've likely got questions about the storms and everything else as well. Take the sheriff and some of the lads too. It will help if they see human faces. You don't want them to panic and try to do something stupid, thinking that they're under attack by trolls. Dominic chuckled, remembering what had happened to the last armed group that had come from Dago's controlled territory. They hadn't even made it past the villagers in the trollish town a day's walk away. All right, I will grab some of the town guards and bring a bunch of trolls. That should get the point across, and still put a friendly human face on things. Though, if they're not prepared to deal with the less than human, it's likely better to keep moving. The Castellan laughed. They're likely from Kynwyn. All their old nobles were non-human anyhow. It's not like they're actual Dago's refugees. Fair. All right, I will get going. We can't have them reaching the outlying farms, or even Baron Keith's place, while he's not there. Letting his wife bear the brunt of their questions isn't fair to her. Dominic headed outside and whistled for Dave to join him, before going to find his new warhorse. Dave could run for hours on end, and he wouldn't complain as long as he knew that there was soup at the end of the day. Working in the manor compound, that was basically guaranteed. So, Dave didn't really complain at all. The stable hand saw him coming and brought the mechanical horse out, saddle cleaned and ready to go. Very ready to go, Dominic noted. It had been painted, with panels displaying various scenic views around Westover instead of the old Dago's livery. It was a bit informal, by usual standards, but Dominic liked it. The horse was dedicated to Westover. All right, Dave. We're going to greet new people. We just need to gather some of the soldiers or town guards to go with us, so we don't scare the humans. Dave laughed. Go to Pop's place. There was a tractor there this morning, and it can keep up with Dave. That was a good call. Guardsmen, fall in on me. We're going to go greet the first refugee buses. Borrow a tractor or carriage unless you can keep up with Dave's jogging speed. Got it. We will borrow the prototype bus. It's set up for going to the baronies, and the first one just left, so they won't need this one for a while. There was a second vehicle sitting in front of the manor, and it looked more refined than the one sitting between Pop's place and the old carriage works. It was much smaller than a merchant caravan tractor, or most of the ones that they used around town. It was based on a light transport, intended for no more than 10 people plus a driver. That was enough for the town guard team that was coming with them, and they left Dominic to explain the situation to Pops while they loaded. I will bring it right back. We're just going to meet some refugees that are getting too close to town. The new barons haven't had time to settle in yet. He called. Go ahead. I've got some of the mages here today. They can go inform the others to come to the city first, and then you can sort out the mess. Thanks, Pops. Chapter 557. She Knows Soup. Dominic led the odd convoy toward the overloaded bus that had broken away from the other refugees. The driver brought it to a gentle stop in front of Dominic, who had brought his mechanical horse to a stop in the overgrown cart path. Greetings, Lord Westover. We had been informed that one of the old bloodline had taken charge of Westover, but we didn't dare to dream that it would actually be true. The driver shouted out his window. The people on the side of the bus began to climb down and come forward. At first, Dominic was concerned, but they all came to touch his leg, then bowed and backed away. It didn't take a genius to figure out what was going on. They worshipped the old royal bloodline, and he was obviously Dragonkin, with a force of trolls behind him. My lord, how should we address you? One of the older men asked. You may address me as the Duke of Westover. That is the title I have earned from the King of Signia, who now controls all of Stantia province. For a moment, the old man looked concerned. Then he smiled and nodded. It is good to see you back in the country, your grace. Is there space for your humble servants within your lands? Dominic smiled. Indeed there is. Especially those who know how to homestead or farm, as well as the millers, coopers, and other trades that the barons will need. There are 36 barons and hundreds of knights under me now. Everyone has just arrived and is at the Westover Manor for a grand wedding ceremony and debutante event. So, we might ask that you camp near the city for a day or two until the barons are ready to settle new arrivals. The houses have been empty for a decade, but they have most of what they need, and the barons are skilled enough with magitech that they can help you renovate. The refugees looked shocked. Houses? The old man asked. Westover Duchy was left untouched after the invasion. The Dago's soldiers didn't dare to remain here, and nobody ever moved in before I returned to my home. So, there are thousands of farmhouses, barony manors, and other homes within the territory. Kindly don't move into the manors. They've been granted to titled nobles. However, there is a map of properties available. They're all on the north side of the river, as the south side suffers from a major monster infestation, and it's not safe for permanent occupation. You haven't tried to clear it? The old man asked. Dominic shook his hand. There is a monster summoning array and a defensive barrier, and we are keeping it active as a hunting location for the adventurers. It provides the chance for them to get gear, money, and meat for the city. Just the other day, it spawned a large force of boars, and the adventurers provided tons of fresh meat for the city. For that reason alone, it's worth keeping the array active, despite the threat. The refugees looked at him like he was a bit crazy, but then they seemed to just accept that this was how things were. Are there other threats in the region? Not really. There is a trollish village a day's walk away, and they patrol their territory, so not much gets within that distance of the city from the north. The refugees nodded happily. It's good to see that you've re-established the royal relationship with the trolls. Should we expect to see more than these few in the city? You might see some from the village come to trade, and then there is a large force of these fine lads of the mountain troll tribe working as guards at the manor. The old man smiled. Dave or Larry? These are Dave, but we've got some Larry too. Oh, and there's a Larry on the edge of town. He's a healer, and his wife is a midwife. You're likely wondering why we rushed ahead. I told them that it looks like we're greedy or don't care about our people. But this bus contains only educated folk who couldn't be called unskilled loafers should we have come across a noble unwilling to take new residents. Dominic laughed. Well, that's not going to be a problem. The city is short on housing, and we were concerned that your group was nothing but laborers from the old capital. But farmers and tradesmen will be welcome under every one of the barons, as well as laborers with magic. We've got magitech factories all over the city, and they always need qualified staff. However, we will train for the position if they have enough magical aptitude. The farmers aren't losing out, though. Westover is highly fertile, especially with the trolls around. We've pulled an entire crop already and expect a strong yield at the end of the wet season. The crops do look good. Did you have a spot you'd like us to set camp? We will inform the others. There is an open field by the Axbridge Army Detachment. It's elevated and dry. They're not hostile. They're here for the debutante event and some negotiations between the nations. The old man smiled wistfully. If only we'd gotten here a week or two earlier, we might have gotten some of our daughters married off. Dave laughed. Lots of farmers' sons and hunters left looking for wives. But too many noble daughters. The old man winked at the troll. Well, we might be in luck. I brought along a pretty granddaughter who knows about soup. Dave didn't look convinced. Better than Larry knows about soup? That's a big request. But better than most humans know about soup. She'll make someone a good wife. From the bus, a deep feminine voice laughed. Trying to get me married off before we even arrive. Old man? Who better to judge a man who can appreciate a good woman than a mountain troll? From the bus emerged a woman nearly 2 meters tall and thickly muscled, clearly part ogre or giant, but without the signature hideous face of the monster species. Dave looked her up and down. Yup, looks like she knows about soup to me. Chapter 558, Talking Soup. Well, you two can discuss soup on the way to town. I've sent some mages to the rest of the group, and they will ask them to follow us, and not to settle into some random baron's house while he's waiting for the wedding ceremonies to finish before he moves in. The refugees laughed. They could definitely see someone trying it, but they wouldn't be surprised if they were chased back out by the local barons. especially if they had just been titled and assigned lands. If you want to load back into the bus, I will lead you to the right spot and ask some of the soldiers to help you get set up. They're usually free to have someone help, and it assures them that you're not a threat. Dominic suggested, then turned to the massive woman. Why don't you jog with Dave? He looks like he wants to talk about soup. The young woman laughed. Yes, I think he does. In the bus, the town guards wondered why they had been brought along at all. Dominic had it handled without any issues, and the refugees seemed much more happy to see him in particular than any number of humans. No need to rush. Keep it slow. The ground here is rough, and we've got all afternoon to get you settled into camp. It doesn't look like it's going to rain today, and tomorrow we can start moving you out to new homes. The driver smiled back at him. That's the best news we've heard in a decade, Your Grace. That seemed like an overstatement, in Dominic's estimation, but the driver was 100% serious. It really was a horrific change compared to life under the Dragon King. Life under the King of Dagos, whose nobles treated commoners like trash, and the decade-long drought had changed everything. Plus, there was the flight of so many of the demi-humans, sorcerers, and even the techno-wizards. Their entire lifestyle had collapsed down around them in the capital region, and the military patrols were so strict that they could barely travel to deliver goods to the city. Forget trying to flee. They had cracked down on that early. Anyone who tried to run into Axbridge was treated as a traitor to the nation. On a good day, that got you killed by the patrols. On a bad day, your death was much slower. But now with the flooding, there were no patrols. They had all fled for safety at the first sign of danger, and that let everyone run. The big woman who had left the bus came up to jog beside Dominic as they returned to town. Are you serious about them being willing to take all of us in? There are a lot of people in the second group. Dominic nodded. It will depend on their skills. There should be housing for at least 50 families under each of the barons before you have to start building more. We've been using Magitech tractors, so most families are working a virgate each. There is more than that in each barony, though not all of it will be workable, and many of them chose lands that are better for hunters and woodcutters. Even tough, most of us are using Magitech fireplaces now. Where do you get those? I heard about them in the capital, but couldn't afford one. We make them here. That big warehouse on the far side of town, with a forge stack? That's the fireplace factory. We have a whole team of apprentice techno-wizards in there, as well as the potters making the fake logs. It's become our biggest source of revenue. Her face lit up as Dominic explained the situation. And, do you make more Magitech items? Lamps, some small-scale items at local shops, and airships. Airships will be the next big revenue source for the duchy, now that we finished testing the new design. Did you have the sort of magical aptitude for the job? She shook her head. Not me. I'm good with a forge, so I might be alright in some shops. But I don't have the patience for fiddly stuff like Magitech circuits. Well, if you keep talking soup with Dave, you might end up as someone's good farm wife. She laughed and gestured at herself. You think that I'd actually find a proper husband? I might do better applying for the town guard. You'd be well suited. But you're not the only taller than average sword in town. Westover is something of a gathering point for sorcerers and other monster-blooded sorts that didn't have anywhere else to go. Not every mixture leads to much magical aptitude, especially the ogres, who inherit magic resistance. And you just take them in? Have you ever tried to say no when a half-ogre bouncer tells you it's time to leave? They're in high demand for heavy labor as well. There were only 2 families with ogre blood that Dominic knew of, and one were farmers. The other had a son working at the inn, while the father was a woodcutter. The trip to the clearing wasn't long, and the soldiers had already sent a detail over to meet them. What are we doing? The lieutenant asked. Help them set up camp. There are many more coming. Make sure that they have cooking facilities, and I will add them to the rotation for the witches and their delivery tomorrow. Other than that, they should have the basics. Oh, I've got a fireplace on me. Set them up a hearth or fire pit with that. You've got someone who can use fieldstone wall or stone transmutation, right? The lieutenant shook his head. Nope. No mages on our team, but we can find stones to make one naturally. Dominic waved off his concern. I will make a grill and oven setup. Miss, I forgot to get your name. What do you have for food left? Potatoes, potatoes, and more potatoes. We might have some carrots and onions as well. The lieutenant laughed. I've got ration packs. We're not using them up at the expected rate when the farms are sending us fresh food every morning. You can make a ham and potato soup. There are spices in the pack. Praise the Lords. Something other than potatoes. Chapter 559. What they needed. It was strange to see people so excited about a single platoon-sized military meal pack, with its preserved ham and hardtack biscuits. But many of the refugees had been struggling to survive on rodents and potatoes even before the flooding drove them out of their homes. Anything was better than that. Dominic saw that the rest of the refugees were coming their way, being led by a flying mage. That made it pretty clear that they had been vetted and found to be acceptably safe, or the Duskblade sect would have taken care of them. Dominic set down the fireplace, then began building a grill and oven with fieldstone wall. It didn't have to be too large, but long enough to have 3 or 4 pots set on top would be best. There were a lot of refugees coming, and Dave would be greatly distressed if there was not enough soup. As soon as he had the stove set up, there were large pots being brought out and filled with water by an older man who winked at Dominic as he pretended that the broken Magitech orb in his hand was for water creation. He was actually just casting the spell. But in Dagos, mages were only not truly accepted, even if they were working for the nobles. The trolls were quick to run off and bring back various vegetables from nearby fields, grown to maturity in seconds with magic. When he was motivated, Dave was very good at growing food. All right, if you get started on enough for everyone, I will see what I can do about arranging numbers. Give me a moment to speak to the town guards. Dominic explained, then headed to the transport with the guards. Do you guys have a radio in there? The driver nodded. Indeed. Can you put out a call to have the barons who have arrived check the houses on their property? I need to know how many people we can send each of them and what sort of specialists they need out of the new arrivals. The driver nodded. That shouldn't be hard. They're already chatting about it on the secondary channel. Perfect. Get at least a rough number out of them, based on the houses they think might be good, so we can start sending them people in the morning. The second bus should be on its way now, and they'll all be settled in tonight. It might be a short turnaround, but getting everything going at once will be a good test for them. Arranging their home, and a barony full of new farms will stress them enough that everything afterward will look easy. The driver laughed, and then started to explain the situation on the radio. The response was immediate. The men left the ladies to decorate the manors and rushed out to count livable houses on the property. The enthusiasm level was extremely high as the second group of refugees approached, moving faster as they got close, and the wind blew the smell of stewing meat their way. They were nearly running by the time that the cooking area came into sight, before collapsing near the soup pots. No need to run. Lots for everyone. Bring out bowls, and we will get you fed. Dave insisted. I am arranging for the barons to take you in tomorrow morning, so take your time setting camp after dinner, but don't unpack everything. You'll be moving on to permanent residences within the week, if you're planning to stay in Westover. Dominic added. Really? All of us? One of the men asked. I think we can find somewhere for everyone. It might not be doing what you had hoped, but if you can adapt, you'll find that Westover Duchy is accepting of everyone who wants to make a decent life. We've got good cropland, no drought, plenty of magic and Magitech farm equipment. Not enough for the whole duchy yet, but we're making more every day. If you have those sorts of skills, come to me tonight and I will arrange for you to stay in town. If you have resources to start a shop and want to stay in the city instead of setting up with a baron, let me know. Other than that, the baronies are freshly settled with Signia nobles who are Magitech friendly. Dominic explained. There wasn't too much response to that. The refugees needed time to think and food. But after a few minutes, the first few started to make their way over to the bus, where Dominic was listening to the radio broadcasts from the barons. It sounded like the second group of them had reached their new homes, and the manors were in reasonably good shape after they had found and reactivated the Magitech circuitry within the house. The self-repair function was everywhere within the territory, from what Dominic could determine. Only a few had not managed to find the panel, or had found the panel to be damaged beyond repair. That put a bit of a damper on their arrival, but the sect was already sending people to them to get the Magitech back online, so they could be comfortable for the night. Good news, everyone. We have 20 barons now at their houses, with their knights and lords to arrive in the next few weeks. They have reported a total of over 2,000 houses for the common folk that are ready to move in with nothing more than cleaning and minor repairs. That should be enough for the entire group to have their choice of suitable housing. If you would come this way and make your mark on the category of housing you would like, or your job if you have a trade, I will prepare everything and come back in the morning with the good news. If there are larger families here and you want your extended family together, let me know that as well. However, I do recommend splitting up extended families so that your closest neighbors will not be immediate family. Chapter 560. Spread the work. The refugees laughed at Dominic's comment. While it was tempting to live around all family members, he had a point. Hard work meant not much time to do anything else. So, if you were around only family, your children would have to travel to find marriage partners, even if it was just the next village over. But that also meant that they wouldn't have grown up with suitable partners, and the very best would have already been chosen. The most capable sons would be snapped up by the most ambitious or most beautiful daughters long before marriageable age. There was no doubt about that. 2/3 of the group had married a childhood friend or neighbor. All right, we will try not to get too settled in tonight. There are some city folk with us, but I get the feeling that I already know what your concern is. One of the old men began. He's worried that he's going to end up with 1,000 shop clerks in a town with no job openings, an old woman insisted. She's right. If they can learn to farm, or take up a job in one of the baronies, it will be best. We do need a few shop assistants, but not many. The town is growing, so until we have more skilled tradesmen, there are more people than unskilled jobs. That said, most jobs aren't too hard to learn, and if you've got the potential, we do offer training. The Magitech factories are a great example, or, if you've got children, we've got an academy. It teaches basic knowledge as well as magic. So, if your kids have the ability, they can be trained to be mages instead of common farmers or shopkeepers. The Duskblades sect were formerly a mercenary sect in the Axbridge deserts, and they have the contacts to find work for their graduates who don't wish to remain in Westover. I know how it is, sometimes you just need to see the world. A bunch of the kids laughed at the thought. They had seen more than enough of the world for 1 month, but their parents were more pragmatic. If their child could be trained as a mage, they could change their fate, earn a fantastic living, perhaps even get hired directly by a noble or taken in as a consort, giving their children some noble blood, even if they were not legitimate. Mages really did have it good in life. While they made their marks on the spreadsheet that Dominic had prepared, Amy came out from the manor to check on him. It's almost time to switch out again. How are things going here? Give me another hour and I'll be done getting the signatures, so we will know who is looking for what sort of work. It might not be perfect, but it's enough that I'll be able to sort it out tonight. Amy nodded. I thought that might be the case. I brought a bunch of acolytes from the sect to help finish the work. They'll do night watch for the new arrivals, so they don't have any issues with the soldiers. The last thing we need is a scandal between a traveling soldier and some naive village girl. The town guards laughed quietly at the comment. There were more than a few good-looking young women in the crowd. They could see the temptation to invite one back home for the evening. Perhaps longer than that. Not all of them were married men, after all. All right, you bring them here, and they can take over from me, while I go release Alexis from the duty of standing watch over the weddings. One of the old men cleared his throat. Did I hear you say there are a lot of weddings? I am a priest of the dragon gods, though I've not been able to practice openly in the capital for a decade. Dominic nodded. We're hosting a debutante event with over 1,000 attendees. We've got the barons and over 300 knights and lords who will be married in the next few weeks to stay in the duchy. Then, however many more want to get married here. Some will stay without a title. Most will return to the husband's family estate. But we're short on both clerics and space to hold so many weddings. We've dedicated the entire Adventurers Guild Hall to weddings for the untitled nobles. The old man called a few more over. We're all clergy. Is there a temple in town? There is a small one. It's got a priest living in it already, but Westover is already much larger than it used to be. I'm sure that it can either be expanded, or another one can be built across town. There is always a place for the clergy. The refugees whispered for a moment, then began to cheer and clap. What's got them excited? Dominic whispered. You acknowledged the clergy. I guess you didn't really live it, since they chased you right out of the country, but in Kainwen, they outlawed the worship of the dragon gods and converted all the temples to their own pantheon. Most of the old folk have been attending a church that isn't their own for years, just so that the local lords don't ask too many questions. The last time folk tried to rebel and stopped attending services, the new Duke of Kainwen burned down half the slums as a punishment. The old cleric explained. I knew that things couldn't be perfect, but I didn't know that they were that bad. Most of the others I've met were from Limpsbury or Coster, and they both turned on their nobles the moment that the Signia armies arrived. They don't talk much about the time before the war, and I didn't think to ask, so it never came up. It's all in the past now, anyhow. Kainwen has been completely flooded. If anything survived outside the palace district, which has a barrier over it, I will be surprised. That's a lot of cleansing, and everything will be built back new with all new residents by the time that everything is settled. But who knows, it might not even belong to Dagos much longer. A little birdie told me that they might not be able to get rid of the armies from Withiton, who came under the auspices of Axbridge, helping Kainwen recover from the disaster after the water goes down.